Japan. What if the flawless utopia the West has always admired is actually a beautifully designed voluntary prison? We look across the Pacific at Tokyo, a metropolis operating with silent, spotless precision while Times Square drowns in chaotic noise, and we see our ultimate societal dream perfected. Zero crime, absolute order, uninterrupted harmony. But beneath this magnificent surface lies a chilling reality. This is not the pinnacle of human evolution, but a desperate collective defense mechanism. Americans equate open space with personal liberty. We look at a map of the United States, see the vast, stretching highways of Texas or the wide avenues of Washington, D.C., and understand our culture of loud independence. We demand room to breathe, room to speak. Then we look at Japan. The greater Tokyo area packs in roughly 14,000 people per square mile. Compare that to the sprawl of Los Angeles, hovering around 8,500 people per square mile. Or even the densest urban centers in the West. In the American mind, packing that many human beings into such a suffocating radius guarantees friction. Noise, shouting, constant, unavoidable collision. That is the natural physics of a crowded society. Walk into Shinjuku Station during the morning rush hour. More than 3.5 million passengers pass through its gates every single day, a vast, unrelenting sea of dark suits. A relentless tide of briefcases and hurried steps. Yet the dominant sound is not human voices. It is the rhythmic, hypnotic clicking of shoes on polished tiles. No casual conversations, no aggressive pushing, no overlapping laughter. Just a synchronized silent flow. Western observers see this and praise the ultimate triumph of civic duty. We assume this immaculate order comes from a deep, enlightened respect for individual freedom. That belief is fundamentally flawed. This silence is not born from a celebration of liberty. It is born from an absolute terror of crossing invisible lines. In Tokyo, public space serves an entirely different purpose than a public square in Boston or a park in Chicago. American public spaces are designed for life, for gathering, protesting, debating, existing loud and large. Japanese public spaces are designed for transit. You do not live in them, you simply move through them. Look at the urban planning texts guiding Tokyo's post-war reconstruction. The concept of livable streets, a staple in Western city design championed by figures like Donald Appleyard in the 1980s, encourages loitering, lingering, and community friction. Japanese urban design actively resists this. Planners engineered major thoroughfares and transit hubs to prioritize the smooth elimination of pedestrian congestion. In entertainment districts like Roppongi or the tight, winding residential alleys of Setagaya, the architecture itself enforces distance. Narrow streets with no sidewalks, homes built mere inches apart, yet the walls are so thick with social expectation that neighbors live decades without exchanging a single meaningful word. The physical proximity demands a psychological fortress. When millions of bodies are forced onto a narrow, volatile island, the only way to survive without tearing each other apart is to build invisible walls. You do not look others in the eye. You fold your wet umbrella tightly so it drips only on your own shoes. You silence your phone on the train. You shrink your physical footprint. The goal is not merely to be polite. The goal is to leave absolutely no trace of your existence in the shared environment. This creates a devastating paradox. You're constantly surrounded by the heat and breath of others, yet you have never been more alone. A person can sit on a packed commuter train crossing the Shibuya Scramble, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, breathing the same recycled air, and remain entirely isolated in a bubble of self-imposed exile. The order we admire from afar is an exhausting performance, a daily grueling exercise in erasing oneself. To breathe too loudly, to speak out of turn, to take up space is to risk burdening the collective. It is a society where distance is engineered into the very concrete beneath their feet. Every train line, every crosswalk, every narrow doorway is calculated to keep human friction to absolute zero. They have mastered the art of physical coexistence by perfecting the art of emotional quarantine. You are safe from violence, safe from theft, safe from the unpredictable chaos of American streets, but you are also safe from connection. The architecture keeps the bodies apart, the silence keeps the peace. But physical distance is only the outer shell. True isolation begins the moment they speak. If you want to understand why millions of people can live shoulder to shoulder, yet remain entirely closed off, do not just look at the city streets. Listen to the words they use. English is a language of ego. In the United States, our sentences revolve around a single, fixed center. I want, I feel, I believe. The individual exists first, and the world bends around them. Our language empowers the self. The Japanese language operates on an entirely different law of interaction. There is no standalone I. If you're a young man speaking to your boss at a corporate office in Marunouchi, Tokyo, you refer to yourself as watashi. Later that night, having drinks with your childhood friends, you become boku. If you want to assert dominance in an argument, you shift to or. The speaker's identity literally does not exist until they evaluate the person standing across from them. The renowned linguist Susumu Kuno noted this phenomenon in his research. He pointed out that Japanese speakers cannot formulate a basic sentence without first calculating their exact social distance from the listener. The language often drops the subject entirely. Instead of saying, "I'm sad," you simply say "sad." The language literally erases the speaker from the room. This is not just an extreme form of politeness. It is a survival reflex inherited from a brutal past. During the rigid class divisions of the Edo period, stretching from 1603 to 1867, a misplaced word was deadly. Speaking out of turn or using the wrong honorific with a samurai could mean immediate execution. Citizens learned to read the air, a practice known today as kuki wo yomu. You learned to navigate hierarchy flawlessly. You learned that your personal desires were the absolute least important part of the conversation. That historical pressure birthed a psychological divide that defines modern Japanese life, a permanent split in human communication. They call the outer shell tatame. It translates roughly to the built-in front, the public face, the socially acceptable response. When a Kyoto shop clerk bows deeply to a rude customer, or when a salaryman agrees to work a 14-hour shift without a single sigh, you are witnessing tatame in motion. It is the grease that keeps a highly congested society turning without friction. Buried deep beneath that flawless surface is hane. The true sound, the raw, unfiltered reality of a person's exhaustion, their anger, their secret grief. In Western cultures, deliberately hiding your true feelings is usually labeled as hypocrisy. Americans value aggressive authenticity. We are taught to speak our truth, even if it causes a scene. We view a mismatch between words and feelings as a lie. In Japan, however, tatame is not a lie. It is a supreme moral duty. You smile, you apologize, you offer the expected polite phrase to protect the peace of the room. The late Jungian psychologist Hayao Kawai extensively explored how this division became the ultimate social glue. During the post-war economic miracle from the 1950s to the 1980s, the nation needed absolute, unquestioning unity to rebuild from ashes. The individual had to be suppressed for the factories to run and the cities to rise. Tatame was the tool that allowed millions of people to endure immense personal suffering without breaking the collective stride. You wear the polite mask not to deceive, but to shield others from the burden of your own chaos. But what is the cost of wearing a mask that you can never take off? If you spend your entire life prioritizing the comfort of the group, your hane becomes a prisoner. Your true self is locked away in the dark. The isolation you feel on a crowded subway is deeply emotional. People are starving for connection, but the very vocabulary they speak forces them to keep a polite distance. When a person is depressed, when the weight of their daily life becomes unbearable, they often cannot ask for help. The language of public life does not accommodate raw human suffering. To complain is to break the harmony. To break the harmony is to fail society. So the pain remains unspoken, the smile stays fixed. You can sit across from your own family at a dinner table in Osaka and still feel light years away from them. The group accepts your mask. They praise your flawless behavior, but the real you, the hane, is left completely alone in the silence. The words designed to keep society safe are the exact same words that keep the individual isolated. Walk down a bustling sidewalk in downtown Chicago or New York. If a pedestrian suddenly trips and collapses on the concrete, the reaction is immediate. Strangers rush forward. Hands reach out. The Good Samaritan instinct is deeply wired into the American psyche. We believe that a crisis demands loud, messy, immediate intervention. Now, place that same scenario on a packed crosswalk in Shibuya, or right outside the busy ticket gates of Ueno Station. A person falls, and often a terrifyingly organized silence takes over. People glance momentarily. They adjust their walking path. They step around the fallen figure. They continue their commute to an American observer. This looks like the ultimate metropolitan nightmare. A cold, hyper-efficient society devoid of empathy. Heartless. But that judgment is entirely wrong. The crowd is not ignoring the fallen person out of malice or apathy. They are paralyzed by an invisible, overwhelming terror. From the moment they enter the formal moral education classes, known as dotoku, in elementary school, Japanese citizens are conditioned by a single, supreme rule of existence, maiwaku, the absolute prohibition against causing trouble for others. To step in, to touch a stranger, to force your help upon someone who might just be clumsy, is to risk inflicting meiwaku on them. You might embarrass them. You might cause an unpredictable scene. Politeness, in this specific context, is not about warmth or generosity. Politeness is the art of staying entirely out of the way. It is the active withdrawal of the self to maintain the flawless harmony of the whole. But when a culture worships the act of not bothering anyone, that courtesy slowly weaponizes. It turns inward. It becomes a sharp blade that severs the most basic human right, the right to be vulnerable. If your greatest moral failure is becoming a burden, you amputate your own needs. You stop asking for a hand up. You refuse to call your children when you fall ill. Look at the massive cultural shift towards shukatsu, the end-of-life preparation industry that exploded across the country in the 2010s. Hundreds of thousands of elderly citizens are actively booking their own cremations, packing up their own photo albums, and clearing out their apartments while still perfectly healthy. They do this out of pure dread, the dread of leaving a messy, inconvenient aftermath for their relatives to clean up. This hyper-polite independence leads directly to a quiet, devastating epidemic. The National Police Agency recently released a staggering forecast. Approximately 68,000 elderly citizens are expected to die entirely alone in their homes. This year, government surveys from 2020 revealed that roughly 1 in 5 elderly Japanese men have virtually no social interactions whatsoever. They simply lock their doors. They fade away. Kodokushi, lonely death. What happens when a society is so polite that people refuse to scream for help? They die quietly. Weeks pass. The mail piles up. An entire specialized industry was born just to erase the physical traces of this isolation. Risk-benefit. A prominent specialized cleaning firm operating out of Tokyo dispatches crews in hazmat suits every single morning. They enter silent, decaying apartments in wards like Setagaya. They scrub dark stains from tatami mats. They carefully sort through perfectly folded laundry left by a person who slowly starved to death rather than bother the landlord for assistance. Another organization, a cleanup service called Next, operating across the Kansai region, reports the exact same haunting reality. Their workers rarely find signs of sudden, unpredictable heart attacks. Instead, they find empty refrigerators. They find elderly citizens who grew too weak to walk to the local grocery store, yet remained too ashamed to dial the municipal welfare office. Even traditional logistics groups like Todo Company have pivoted heavily into relic sorting. They box up lives that vanished without making a single sound. The state desperately tries to fight this quiet tragedy. Local municipalities rolled out Mimamori initiatives, a nationwide network where postal workers and gas meter readers are legally encouraged to check on unusually quiet homes. Tech companies stepped in to fill the void. Zojirushi, a famous appliance brand, launched the iPot, a smart electric kettle that automatically emails relatives twice a day, just to prove the user is still boiling water, still breathing, but a smart kettle cannot undo a lifetime of psychological conditioning. These individuals are not victims of sudden, accidental abandonment. They chose the shadows, they chose the solitary end, because to beg for survival is to become a burden. To demand attention is to violate the harmony. This is the agonizing human toll of a flawlessly courteous civilization. Politeness ceases to be a bridge connecting human beings. It transforms into an unbreakable, perfectly polished wall. You smile, you bow, you suffer completely alone, and you quietly disappear, ensuring the streets outside remain beautiful. Perfectly undisturbed. When a nation starts running out of people, the arithmetic is brutal. The United States faces an aging population, much like the rest of the developed world. Our solution is the same as it has always been, the melting pot. We open the doors. In 2022 alone, the U.S. welcomed over 1 million legal immigrants to fill gaps in the labor force, keep hospitals running, and sustain economic growth. We absorb new cultures to survive. Japan faces an even steeper demographic cliff. By 2040, the country will face a shortage of 11 million workers, yet their approach to immigration remains drastically different. Historically, foreign-born residents make up less than 3% of Japan's total population. Even with recent desperate visa expansions, the numbers remain a fraction of Western intake. When forced to choose between importing foreign labor and facing economic stagnation, Japan made a choice that baffles Western economists. They chose machines. To an American, replacing a human caregiver with a robot feels deeply dystopian. It conjures images of cold steel and a lonely, clinical end. We crave human warmth. But to understand why a Japanese citizen might prefer a mechanical nurse over a foreign worker, you have to look past economics. You have to look at their spiritual foundation. Deeply embedded in the Japanese worldview is Shintoism, the indigenous faith of the islands. Central to Shinto is the concept of kami, the idea that a spiritual essence, a soul, exists in everything, not just trees and rivers, but inanimate objects, tools, weapons, and today, technology. There is a famous Shinto shrine in Tokyo, the Kanda Myojin, where priests regularly bless smartphones and computer microchips to ensure their good functioning. In Kyoto, at the Kokuzoji Temple, a robotic monk named Mindar delivers Buddhist teachings to worshippers. Because of this animistic belief, machines are not viewed as cold, soulless replacements, they are companions. They are part of the natural order. When a company like SoftBank introduced Pepper, a humanoid robot designed to read emotions, it was placed in nursing homes across the country. Elderly residents did not recoil, they talked to it. They treated it with affection. Another firm, Cyberdyne, developed the HAL exoskeleton, a robotic suit designed to help paralyzed patients walk or assist caregivers in lifting heavy adults. These are not just medical tools, they are social solutions, but there is a darker, more pragmatic reason behind this technological embrace. A robot is the ultimate citizen in a society obsessed with meiwaku. A machine does not complain, it does not demand small talk, it does not misunderstand the subtle, unspoken rules of the room. A robot will never make an inappropriate joke, speak too loudly, or bring a conflicting cultural value into a quiet neighborhood. In short, a robot perfectly understands tatame, it maintains the mask. Integrating millions of immigrants means introducing chaos into a hyper-ordered system. It means accepting people who do not instinctively know how to read the air, kuki wo yomu. It means potential friction, cultural clashes, and the dilution of a very specific, carefully guarded way of life for a nation that has spent centuries perfecting its internal harmony. That kind of disruption is viewed as a far greater threat than economic decline. Japan is making the largest existential gamble in modern history. They are betting that technology can save their society without altering its DNA. They are choosing to preserve the absolute purity of their culture, even if it means slowly aging in the company of machines. The West chose human vitality at the cost of constant cultural friction. Japan chose perfect, undisturbed silence. In the United States, survival is synonymous with endless hustle. We grind through gig economies, we climb corporate ladders, we buy bigger houses in sprawling suburban neighborhoods and celebrate the relentless pursuit of more. American culture equates ambition with the very right to exist. Japan demanded a different kind of endurance from its previous generations. Absolute, unquestioning loyalty. The post-war salaryman gave his physical health to the nation. He worked 14-hour days, he sacrificed his personal life. He built an economic empire, but human endurance is finite. You can only push a population to operate flawlessly for so long before the internal pressure finds a crack. Today, the birth rate in Japan has plummeted below 1.2 children per woman. In 2023, the number of marriages fell below 500,000 for the first time in 90 years. Car ownership among young adults in major cities dropped by nearly 20% over the last decade. Western observers look at these plummeting numbers and instantly diagnose an economic tragedy. They assume the youth are simply too poor, too exhausted, or too depressed to participate in normal life. They miss the silent rebellion hiding in plain sight. This is not a failure of ambition. It is a deliberate, calculated refusal. The current generation looked closely at the lives of their fathers during the lost decades of the 1990s and 2000s. They saw the exhaustion. They saw the heavy burden of keeping up the polite public face, the endless apologies, the silent train rides, the eventual lonely death. And they found the only available exit. If the cost of participating in the daily grind is your entire soul, the only way to win is to stop playing the game. They stopped demanding promotions. They stopped buying luxury goods. Walk into a family mart in Shibuya at midnight. You will see young men and women quietly stocking shelves. Go to a Lawson in Osaka and you find the exact same scene. Many of these young adults hold university degrees, yet they willingly choose to work part-time, earning just enough yen to cover a small apartment and basic meals. They are known as freeders. A freeder survives on the absolute margins of the corporate world. They reject the grueling, lifelong contracts. They refuse to attend the forced drinking parties with bosses. They take shifts at 7-Eleven, collect their hourly wages, and go home to empty rooms. They have stripped their lives of expectations. You cannot be crushed by the weight of social duty if you refuse to carry anything at all. They do not protest in the streets. They do not hold up signs or burn buildings. Their strike is entirely silent. By desiring nothing, they become immune to a culture that controls people through expectations. Sociologist Norihiro Furichi spent years documenting this exact generational shift. In his extensive research during the 2010s, he observed that despite the bleak economic statistics, these young people report surprisingly high levels of personal satisfaction. They are not miserable, they are simply detached. Another prominent researcher, sociologist Masahiro Yamada, watched the traditional family life dissolve. He noted how the youth actively retreated from the intense pressure cooker of adulthood and financial obligation. These scholars help map the rise of what is now called the Satori Sadai, the enlightened generation. In Buddhist tradition, Satori means enlightenment. It is the state of achieving inner peace by letting go of all earthly desires. It is a profound spiritual victory, but when an entire demographic achieves this state simultaneously, it becomes a demographic time bomb. They do not want cars, they do not want marriages, they do not want to climb. The nation relies heavily on human ambition to keep the factories running, the taxes flowing, and the trains perfectly on time. The older generation built a flawless, suffocating world. The younger generation simply unplugged themselves from it. The staggering population collapse is not just a biological crisis. It is the largest, quietest labor strike in human history. A collective, unspoken decision to let the flawless society slowly fade away. American culture idolizes the unblemished. We look at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., scrubbed clean and bright white, desperate to erase the wear of time. We celebrate the intact, the undefeated champion. In the Western mind, flaws are failures, scars are things to hide, things to fix. To understand how Japan processes its own immense social fractures, you must look away from the spotless streets. You must look at a shattered tea bowl. In the late 15th century, during the violent and culturally transformative Muromachi period, Shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa accidentally broke his favorite Chinese celadon tea bowl. He sent it across the sea for repairs. When it returned, it was held together by thick, ugly metal staples. The visual harmony was ruined. Displeased, the shogun challenged local craftsmen to find a more elegant way to heal the vessel. They responded by inventing an art form. They called it kintsugi, golden joinery. The craftsmen did not try to hide the cracks. They did not attempt to trick the eye into believing the bowl was whole. Instead, master artisans employing the maki-e tradition, sprinkling fine gold, silver, or platinum powder over wet, toxic lacquer, carefully traced the fault lines. They illuminated the damage. They made the fractures glow. A shattered bowl repaired this way instantly became more valuable than it was before the fall. You can observe these deeply scarred, revered vessels preserved today in the quiet, shadowed tier rooms of Daitokuji Temple in Kyoto. The damage is no longer a defect. It is the defining, beautiful history of the object. This is not merely an antique method for fixing pottery. It is the exact emotional reflection of the Japanese national psyche. Westerners look at the extreme emotional isolation of Tokyo. We look at the plummeting birth rates, the silent trains, and the heavy social masks people wear to survive the day. We assume these are tragic mistakes. But look closely at the yobutsugi style, a highly specialized form of this golden repair. When a piece of the original bowl is entirely lost, the artisan takes a mismatched foreign fragment from a completely different vessel and binds it into the gap with gold. Japan itself is a nation of mismatched fragments, a civilization repeatedly shattered by tectonic violence, like the devastating 1923 Great Kanto earthquake, and by sudden, crushing economic collapses. They did not survive by pretending the fractures never happened. They survived by absorbing the trauma into their identity. The stifling politeness, the immense distance between neighbors, the silent, heavy endurance of the young workers. These are not flaws in their culture. These things are the gold. They are the rigid, shining seams holding a fundamentally fragile island together. When you sit on the wooden veranda of the Ryoanji Zen temple, you look out at a garden of exactly 15 stones, designed by the monk Tokuho Zenketsu around the year 1499. The rocks are laid out so that from any angle, one stone is always hidden from sight. It physically forces you to accept the incomplete. It trains the mind to find profound peace in what is missing. The loneliness we pity from the outside is actually a carefully cultivated meditation on the inside. They have aestheticized their grief. By creating strict rules, by keeping a safe physical distance, by never burdening each other, they ensure the vessel does not shatter entirely. It is a heavy way to live, a quiet, solitary existence. But it possesses a terrible, breathtaking grace. They are a people who have accepted that nothing lasts, nothing stays whole, and instead of fighting that reality, they chose to make the broken pieces shine. You are likely watching this from the comfort of an American living room, perhaps somewhere in Ohio or California. You look at Japan from a safe, comfortable distance, a fascinating, peculiar civilization. We assume their quiet collapse is an isolated anomaly. But the demographic data from the past 20 years shatters this illusion. Japan is not an alien planet. They are simply our own future, arriving 2 decades early. Look at the demographic trajectory of our own neighborhoods. In the early 2000s, Japan's marriage and birth rates began their steep, unprecedented plunge. Western sociologists observed it with detached curiosity. Fast forward to the United States in 2023. The National Center for Health Statistics reported American marriage rates plummeting to historic record-breaking lows. Young Americans in cities from Seattle to Austin are retreating from traditional commitments, citing exhaustion and financial dread. In 2005, Japan shocked global economists when its population officially began shrinking. Today, the United States Census Bureau projects that, barring immigration, the native-born American population is on track to begin a permanent, irreversible decline. The timeline is merely delayed. The destination is exactly the same. We do not have the ancient tradition of samurai honor to enforce our isolation. We do not possess the deep-seated fear of causing public trouble. Yet, we are arriving at the exact same emotional bankruptcy. In 2023, the United States Surgeon General issued a historic 81-page public advisory. The subject was not a physical virus or an environmental disaster. It was a formal declaration of a national loneliness epidemic. The report revealed that over half of all American adults now experience deep, measurable social isolation. Rates of clinical depression among U.S. teens surged by more than 60% between 2011 and 2021. The global community is suffering the same fate. The World Health Organization followed suit, elevating chronic loneliness to a pressing, urgent health threat. They declared the physical damage of this isolation to be as deadly to the human body as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We are dying of the exact same quiet disease that sweeps through the apartment blocks of Tokyo. Japan built their invisible walls using strict, ancient social etiquette. Americans are building ours using modern convenience. We actively replace human friction with digital efficiency. We order dinners through delivery apps specifically to avoid small talk at a restaurant counter. We work remotely, communicating entirely through text to avoid the unpredictable, messy reality of an office. We curate our online profiles on Instagram and LinkedIn to project absolute perfection. We craft a flawless digital mask. It is an American version of the social facade. Our streets in Chicago or Miami might still be filled with noise. Our public debates might still be chaotic. But our private domestic lives are rapidly becoming just as silent, just as untouched, and just as deeply guarded. We are moving toward a reality where a citizen in Manhattan is just as cut off from their neighbors as a salaryman in Shinjuku. This is why you must pay attention. Japan is not a cautionary tale of a strange, distant culture. It is humanity's great, tragic laboratory for the modern era. Following the economic miracle of the 1980s, they reached the absolute peak of material excess first. They conquered poverty, virtually eliminated crime, and engineered a flawlessly safe society. And in doing so, they proved a terrifying truth. When a civilization finally eliminates all friction, it inadvertently eliminates the necessity of human connection. The mirror is held up directly to the West. Look closely at the reflection, because the America of 2040 is already living in Tokyo today. Return to the massive sweeping intersection of Shibuya. Watch the millions of bodies moving in absolute synchronization. Earlier, this flawless movement looked like an impossible utopia, a stunning triumph over the chaotic, deafening reality of Times Square. Now the filter has changed. When you stand outside the famous Hachiko exit today, you do not just see citizens commuting, you see an entire nation holding its breath, the immaculate streets. The trains of the Yamanote line arriving down to the exact second. The absence of a single raised voice across an island of 125 million people. These are no longer just tourist attractions, they are the physical manifestations of a profound collective sacrifice. Every quiet bow inside a Marunouchi office building, every withheld complaint, every step taken carefully to avoid brushing a stranger's shoulder. It is the heavy, invisible labor of keeping the peace. We live in an incredibly loud era. Western societies demand immediate answers. We shout our pain into the void. We fight our friction in public squares across America and Europe. Japan offers a totally different answer to survival, a terrifying, beautiful silence. From the rigid Edo period to the modern Reiwa era, they have always understood that perfection requires a toll. The cost of this undisturbed harmony is a society filled with profoundly isolated individuals. People dining alone in tiny ramen booths in Shinjuku, elderly citizens quietly packing away their own lives in Setagaya, a youth generation choosing solitary peace over the exhausting demands of human entanglement. It is a melancholic reality for tens of millions of people, a deeply lonely existence. Yet there is a breathtaking dignity in this endurance. They do not demand pity. They do not let the societal fabric tear. They carry the immense weight of their cultural inheritance without making a sound. They take their deep, generational fractures and, like the master artisans of traditional kintsugi, they carefully bind them with golden lacquer. They turn the act of suffering alone into a quiet art form. Demographers look at the approaching decades with grim certainty. By the year 2050, the working-age population will shrink drastically. Villages in rural prefectures like Akita will empty out entirely. Looking even further ahead to the dawn of 2100, statistical projections suggest a dramatically smaller nation. Economists in London and New York warn of an inevitable collapse. Western commentators predict a total societal breakdown. They are missing the point entirely. This country will not collapse in chaos. It will simply adapt, shrink, and continue to operate with the exact same flawless grace. They will grow old in the company of silent machines. They will maintain the spotless streets of Kyoto for a dwindling number of footsteps. They will preserve the beauty of their broken pieces. The American novelist Ernest Hemingway famously observed this human condition in his 1929 novel, A Farewell to Arms. He wrote, "The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places." We celebrate the strength of the repair. We admire the loud, visible triumph over adversity, but true resilience does not always shout. In the classic 1914 novel Kokoro, the legendary Japanese author Natsume Soseki offered a much darker, softer truth. He wrote, "Loneliness is the price we have to pay for being born in this modern age, so full of freedom, independence, and our own egotistical selves." Japan paid that price willingly. They traded the messy, loud freedom of the individual for the flawless, silent survival of the whole. So, when you look across the Pacific Ocean at the neon lights, when you watch the perfect, undisturbed flow of the Tokyo commute, do not just marvel at the efficiency. Feel the immense, silent weight they are carrying. Like the golden seams of a kintsugi bowl, it is a heavy, beautiful burden, a quiet survival, and a profoundly lonely masterpiece.